And it's the most horrible thing because you feel so helpless. There was nothing So she tells the doctor that she's in really bad pain and she hasn't slept, and he's like, you should go to the emergency room. If the pain's been keeping you up for 2 days straight, you need to go to the emergency room. So I bring her to the emergency room that night. That night was by far the worst night of my life for so many reasons. She was in pain. I have never seen a human being suffer in pain the way she was in pain that night. She was screaming. We got there around 6 o'clock, 5:30ish. It was just me and her. I sat there by myself with her, screaming in pain, until about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not being dramatic, I have never seen a human being suffer the way I watched my mother suffer that night. I felt like somebody was holding my hands behind my back and I was watching people beat the shit out of her with baseball bats with spikes on them. It was horrible. So it was the worst. It was the fucking worst night I've ever dealt with. 3 or 4 doses of Dilaudid, which is like more powerful than morphine. And the doctors were looking at me like, this woman should not be in pain anymore. Why is she still screaming in pain? Then at one point at the night, probably around like 2 o'clock in the morning, they give her Valium. So now she's on Valium, Dilaudid, fentanyl, painkillers, and she's nodding off. She couldn't sit back and she couldn't put her feet up. So only way she was comfortable was sitting straight up. This is why she didn't sleep. So now she's falling off the bed, so I have to keep readjusting her, sitting up, and then she's, every time you would move her, touch her, like screaming. And people like in the hallways were like, what is going on? Like, you ever go to the emergency room and you hear a person like that screaming and you're just like, what the fuck is going on? That person was my mom that night. And for her to, my mom was the kind of person where she always wanted everybody to think she had everything under control, everything was okay, you know, she got it, she was at it under control. For her to be screaming in pain and not giving a fuck what anybody thinks about what's going on, I knew that her pain was like beyond a 10. When they ask, what's your pain on a scale from 1 to 10? Hers was a 25. Like, it was bad. She was screaming. They give her the Valium. Now she's nodding off. I'm trying to, like, for about 2 hours, I'm sitting there wrestling her, like, getting her back up. Then she's falling over. Then it was like, Leanna, move this. Pick up my leg. Put my leg down. Give me the stool. Give me that. Take the stool away. But, you know, it was a nightmare. It was a fucking nightmare. I felt like it was just torture that night for her and for me. You know, it was, I can't even imagine what she was going through. I was going through my own torture, having to watch your mother suffer and just not being able to do anything about it and not being able to help. So they admitted her into the hospital. And when I left the hospital that night, I remember calling my husband and saying, Chris, something's different. Something has changed. I don't think my mom's making it out of the hospital this time. She had been in the hospital several times in the last year. So from that point on, I watched her just go down. She couldn't walk. She was completely bedridden within like a day. The next day, I remember, after the emergency room, they admit her into the hospital, and I had to go pick up this MRI disc. So I go pick up the MRI disc, and I'm looking at, you know, I opened the envelope, and they had a printout from the doctor in there, and it basically said what was wrong, but it was kind of written in doctor lingo, you know. I didn't know all the words, but I knew enough to know that there was something bad. It wasn't good. I didn't say anything. I got back to the hospital. I handed the disc over to the doctors. I took a picture of it with my phone. That night I went home and I interpreted the whole thing. I went online. I looked up every word. I wrote the whole thing out. She had a tumor on her sacrum, like the doctor said, but it was growing in between her vertebrae. I'm going to show you guys a picture of this, okay? So it was growing in between her vertebrae, pressing on her spine, on her spinal sac, and then also completely compressing her sciatic nerve and all the nerves going down to her legs. So, could you imagine how much pain? And it said on the report that there was a fracture in the spine as well. That I was never clear on if that was the case or not. But that's why she was in so much fucking pain. I can't even believe it. I don't know why she suffered the way she did and didn't go to the emergency room sooner. I don't know. You know, those are the things that I have trouble dealing with. So it was horrible. I mean, I've never seen anybody suffer the way she did in this hospital stay. So she became bedridden. Her kidney was just done. I mean, your creatinine should be like a 0.5. Hers was a 9.8 when we got into the hospital, and it just kept getting higher. Creatinine is just one of the levels that they use to test kidney function. I mean, like, everything you could think of, my mother went through it. So now she's completely bedridden. She was having these horrible anxiety attacks, thinking she was dying. I mean, there was nights I was at the hospital from like day and night. There was, you know, one night where I had to run there at like 3 o'clock in the morning because she was having, you know, anxiety, and she couldn't breathe, and she was panicking. She thought she was dying. Then they put her on oxygen. And, you know, I was going through this basically alone. I mean, you know, she has brothers and sisters, and they came to visit, you know, for an hour once a week or whatever. She was there for 4 weeks. I watched her day in and day out. I was there every day. I would come in the afternoon most days. You know, there was a couple of days, like for the first week she was there because they put her on such a high dose of pain medicine. They gave her a pain pump. I didn't want to bring my son with me, and I had no choice. So I would wait until my husband got home, and then I would go there, and then I would stay there until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Till the nurses actually one time had to yell at me and just tell me to go home. Just go home, get rest. I was there for a month straight. Day in and day out. There was one night I didn't go. One night out of the whole entire month. And I was there during the day. They had to do radiation, which was torture, because she couldn't lay flat on the table because she was in so much pain. And then that same day they started her on dialysis, and that was like, she was just gone. So I was watching her decline, and I feel like, you know, people would come and see her and they would see she's in bad shape, but there was still like hope. And I knew what I was seeing the whole time. There was no question. I knew the end was near. I just didn't know when the end was, you know? So I'm watching her slowly decline every single day, mentally, physically. You know, there was just one point in time, and it was probably around November 14th, that I just kind of saw the change. Like, when somebody's dying, like, I didn't need to know anything else that was going on. I could see it in her eyes. And if you've never seen it, it's really hard to explain. It just looks like the person's not in there anymore. Like they're empty. They just have this detached, just glazed over look. It's just this very empty look. Third Thursday, she was in there. I went in to go talk to the social worker about this because I was like, am I seeing things? Am I being dramatic? Am I making this worse than it is? How come everybody else seems to have hope, and I'm looking at her and thinking like, oh my God, I can't watch this woman suffer anymore. She's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I finally had to tell myself, Leanna, you're the one sitting here for 12 hours a day. I think I knew what I was seeing, you know, but you question yourself. So I went in to talk to the social worker about the rehab facilities because I'm like, what's up with this? She keeps saying she's going there. She doesn't look like she's ready to leave the hospital to me. And the doctor saw me walking in, and he came in, and that was the first time that anybody said the word terminal to me. And he was talking about putting her in hospice. And I was just like, what? And so we've agreed it wasn't, you know, conducive to tell her because she was so in denial about everything and getting very upset and getting really bad anxiety until we had an official plan. The thing that was holding her back from leaving the hospital was that she couldn't walk. And in order to do outpatient dialysis, she would have had to sit up for 4 hours in a chair. And so that Monday, she actually did. She sat up in the chair for about 4 hours. As that week wore on, we got to Wednesday, and it was probably like the 16th or the 15th, whatever day of November. And that was the day I knew something had changed. Something was just different. Her girlfriend came up to visit her. She was just weird that day. She wasn't talking. She was detached. You know, my son was there. She wasn't even like looking at him or paying attention to him. She wasn't looking at me. You know, I was trying to have conversations with her and she was just very out of it, sleeping a lot that day. Those 2 days prior, I had asked the doctor to take her off the antidepressant. They just started her on it a couple of days prior. And I'm like, let's just take her off this. It seems like it's making her very disconnected and apathetic, and, you know, she's not talkative and she's not acting right. Something was off, and I knew something was off because I wanted to see, is it the antidepressant or something else going on? So I remember trying to order dinner for her that night and she wasn't eating, and I handed her the menu and she was getting angry with me, and she's like, Leanna, leave me alone. I could read. I could do it myself. You know, I'm trying to help her. And I was very calm with her, like, okay, Mom, you know, I'm trying to help. Like, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it hurt. It hurt that she's yelling at me, and I'm like, here it is. I'm sitting here day and night with you and you're yelling at me. But, you know, at the time it hurt, but now I understand. I gave her the menu and I sat back and I just watched her, and she was holding the menu completely upside down and thought she was reading it. And so I remember she just kind of looked at it, dozed off, and I took the menu. And I left the hospital that night, and I remember calling my husband again and saying, Chris, something's not right. Thursday, I go back, probably the 17th, Thursday the 17th of November. I go back, and me and my brother had a meeting with the social worker. Mind you, him and I were not communicating. It was so awkward. We were like not talking at this point in time. Too much shit happened. I'll get into it another time. We got upstairs and I see my brother waiting in the hallway, and I'm like, what are you doing? And I walk in and there's doctors and nurses. I thought they were changing her diaper because she had also lost her bowel function. She couldn't move her legs. It was just like she couldn't walk. It was terrible. She was completely bedbound. Couldn't even support her own weight in the bed. So there's doctors and nurses in there. Something happened where her heart rate went like sky high. So I'm like, oh, maybe she's having a panic attack about this social worker meeting, because we were supposed to talk about these rehab facilities and what the plan was to get her to, you know, get her out of the hospital. They didn't know what happened. That night when I left the hospital, I was like, something ain't right. She just wasn't there. She was just off in her own world. I remember asking her that night, Mom, what do you want? I felt restless. I felt like I couldn't do anything. You know, she wasn't talking to me, and she was kind of like, almost seemed like I was annoyed that I was there. I remember her apologizing to me at one point in time, like, Leanna, I'm so sorry this is your life. I'm like, no, Mom, don't be sorry for me. Stop worrying about me. Worry about you. You know, that was her whole problem in life, is that she never put herself first, ever. So I left the hospital that night and I knew something was bad. Something was just wrong. It just didn't feel right. And I called Chris, my husband, and I'm like, Chris, something just changed. Something's different. They took her off the antidepressant, I think, that night. So the next morning, it's like 8:30 in the morning, and she wasn't talking really that day. It was just weird. It was weird. And so they took her off the antidepressant that night, and I'm like, okay, we'll see how she is tomorrow. And all of a sudden, my phone rings, and I woke, you know, I'm awoken by my phone ringing, and I look, and it's my mom, you know, her number, her name is on my phone, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what it was. It was antidepressant. And I answer the phone, and it's my brother's wife calling from my mom's phone, which I won't even get into. But so I'm like, what's going on? She's like, your mom's in really bad shape. She had another episode with her heart overnight. So she's like, you got to get down here. So I fly down to the hospital. They leave when I get there. And then they had to bring her for a heart scan, a CAT scan, you know, whatever. And I knew something was wrong. We were in the hallway. I remember just being in this like long hallway where there was no doors. And when I brought her down for the CAT scan, and I just walked, you know, she was sleeping. She was just out. I mean, she didn't even really wake up when I got there. She was pretty much non-responsive. And I remember walking down the hallway and just like looking at her in the bed, and I fucking lost it. I just started crying. And I'm like, God, please, like, please, don't, you know, I can't watch her suffer like this anymore. I just can't watch her suffer anymore. That was the worst. That was just the worst day. So we go up to the heart. They had to do a sonogram on her heart. I go up there, and now my whole family is starting to come. Aunts, uncles, my mom's sisters. And the doctor comes up and tells me, your mom has what's known as a perforation in her bowels. And I'm like, what? What is that? He's like, well, basically somewhere in her, you know, colon or her intestinal tract, there was some tear somewhere, and it leaked out all the toxins into her blood, so she went septic. And she was in no shape to go for surgery. She had no immune system. They couldn't give her antibiotics because she had no immune system to fight the sepsis. I don't know how you say it. And so we could either, you know, there's nothing really we could do for her. Basically, that's what he was telling me in a nutshell. And he's like, you know, we can't do surgery, which was clear to me. She couldn't go into surgery. He's like, you know, in a healthy person, we could try surgery, but it's not always a guarantee. Or we could try doing antibiotics, but in her situation, she's already, you know, on dialysis, really weak immune system. It's, you know, it's like probably gonna do her more harm than good. So he's like, the other thing we could do is put her on what's called comfort care, where we, you know, just make sure she's comfortable and let her die. What? I knew that that's where things were headed, but that was it that day. And so I had it, you know, I said, listen, I've been here the whole time. I know what's going on with everything. And, you know, obviously I said, if it was your mother, what would you do? And he's like, the comfort care, obviously. And I said, okay, I just, you know, I know what the right choice is. It wasn't much of a choice. And I was like, let me call my brother first. We hadn't spoken the whole, like, weeks. But I said, let me call my brother first and just, you know, double check with him. And then, you know, can I tell you? Sure. My brother, thank God, agreed. That's probably the only thing we agreed on the whole time. We put her on comfort care, and I spent the next 2 days there. You know, my family came. She has a huge family. She's one of 6. So we have all aunts and uncles and cousins and blah, 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 you know. Everybody was there for the last 2 days. She was just unresponsive. So I slept there the first night. You know, he told us it could be hours, it could be days, you know, they don't know, but it was coming soon. So I slept there by myself the first night. Scariest fucking thing, slept. I didn't sleep for 3 nights in a row. Because that first night when I left Thursday night, I think I went to bed at like 6 in the morning, and then I woke up at 8:30. The next night, I stayed at the hospital with her, and I didn't sleep a wink. I mean, the nurses were in and out, and she was still in a room with a roommate, and the nurses were in and out, and, you know, the roommate was coughing and beeping and machines going off, and I'm worried, and all I'm doing is sitting there for hours by myself. You know, my family left like around midnight or so, and I'm watching her chest. You know, you're just watching the chest. Like, is she gonna die? When is she gonna die? I know she's dying now at this point in time. So it's like, when? Like, when is it gonna happen? And what is it gonna be like? And I'm sitting here by myself. There's not one other person in the room with me the whole night. I mean, the nurses, thank God. The nurses at Stony Brook Hospital in New York are the most amazing people in the entire universe. I don't know how these people do their jobs. And then the next night, I stayed again. Her family was there the whole entire day, and that night, I just knew. There was a time when she woke up, and everybody was in the room, and they're like, oh, you know, hey, Carol, how are you? And she looked around, and she's like, good. And she's like, but I'm scared because everybody's here. And then I started crying. I'm sitting on her bed near her feet. And then all of a sudden, she looked at me, and she goes, Lee, you're scaring me. And I just fucking lost it. And I just said to her, Mom, everybody's here because they love you and they're worried about you. And then she just you know, went back to sleep, and it was just like, that was it. So the second night I stayed there, they put her in a private room. You know, I had my heart-to-heart talk with her, told her how fucking amazing she was, because she really was. I don't want to get into it because I'm gonna start crying. The girlfriend that I went to high school with was actually the nurse that night, which was so weird because she worked on the unit but never actually had my mom as a patient except for that night. She helped me. I can't even tell you guys how much this Mary, my friend Mary, helped me, like, tremendously. And I could never repay her for that. Through this whole thing, not just that one day. Even though she wasn't my mom's nurse, she helped so much. I just can't even repay her, ever. And so that was it. I was in there, I talked to her, and then at about 4 a.m. I fell asleep. And then at 7 o'clock, I hear all these noises, and I wake up, and my girlfriend's in the room, and she's, you know, doing something on this heart machine, and I was trying so hard to stay up, but I felt like somebody was pulling my eyelids down that night, and I will never forget this. The night prior, you know, as soon as I heard a noise, I was wide awake. I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, you know, but this night I was completely, like, I couldn't keep my eyes open. I hadn't slept in days by this point, so I fell back to sleep. I looked at my mom. Scariest shit I've ever seen in my life. When somebody's dying and that, like that, they don't look like themselves anymore. Put it that way. Very scary to sit in the room with your mother like that by yourself. But I did it. I don't know how. I still don't know how, but I did it. That 8 o'clock in the morning, I hear a voice going, honey, wake up, it's time, your mom's going. And I opened my eyes, and for some reason, like, I was disoriented, and I looked at the clock, and it said like 8:04. And all of a sudden, I turned my head real quick, because, like, I realized where I was, and I see my mom, and her chest isn't moving anymore. And I look at the nurse, who's now on the other side of the bed, and she's like, I'm like, is she gone? Is that it? And she's like, no, her heart's still beating. But she wasn't breathing anymore. And I was like, I don't even remember what I said to her. And she stood there for about, I told my mom I loved her. I remember that. And she was holding my mom's wrist for like another, like, I don't know, it seemed like a minute, but it was probably just 20, 30 seconds, you know? And she's like, she still has a heartbeat. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching her for like another 20, 30 seconds. And she's like, puts my mom's hand down, and she's like, I gotta go call the doctor. And that was it. We all left the room. I was in there alone with my mom. And I panicked for a second. I was like, what? You know, and then I was like, Leanna, what the fuck is wrong with you? This is peaceful. This is peace. This is a human being who I love more than anybody in the world, who is now at peace and was suffering. She's not suffering anymore. This right now is not scary. What I went through for the last month and what I watched for the last month, that was fucking scary. That was worse than any horror movie I've ever seen in my life. What cancer does to people is fucking horrible. I can't even put into words how horrible it was. Between the mental agony, the physical pain, the dialysis, the fucking fighting in my family, the emotional pain. I mean, I can't even tell you guys. I can't even fucking put it into words what I've been through in the last year of my life. So yeah, November 20th at 8:04 in the morning, even though I think her death certificate says 8:09, it was 8:04. My mom passed away. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm not okay. I'm not okay at all. I mean, I'm getting through life. I'm waking up and breathing every day, but I'm a fucking wreck, you know? I'm trying to hold it together the best I can because I got my son, and I'm a wife, and I'm a mother, and I know my mom wouldn't want me to stop living my life. I know she would want me to go on, but I'm fucking lost. I feel like half of me is missing, all day, every day. I mean, she was like my better half. You know, she was my life. We had our moments where we would bicker and bitch and fight with each other, you know, like normal moms and daughters, but my mom was my best friend. So at 36 years old now, I'm an orphan. I have no mom, no dad. You know, my kid has no grandparent, and I lost my whole family pretty much. I'm not good. I'm not gonna fucking lie to you guys. But yeah. So that's where I've been. Not a good place. I'm still not in a good place, but I have to carry on. I have to carry on with my life. I have to go on. I'm never going to accept this. I'm never going to get past it. It's just going to become a part of me, and I have to figure out a new way to live my life without her. I am completely, utterly traumatized by what I watched her go through. You know, I might change the direction of this channel. I had to find something positive in this really, really fucked up, shitty, goddamn bullshit situation, and if I could help other people, then like I'll feel better. So if there's anybody out there who has been through this or is going through it, and your parents are, you know, sick, or they're in hospice, or they're in anything, reach out to me, please, just to talk. If you have questions, I have to make something positive out of this experience, and because I know that's what my mom would want me to do. It's been a fucking rough year. I can't even put into words how much I miss her. It's just not even, you can't even explain it. She was just an amazing person. You have to look at it positively. Like, she's gone, but what a fucking gift it was to have her as my mother. How lucky I was to have her as my mother for the 36 years of my life. She was a beautiful, amazing, loving, caring, thoughtful, she was such a good mother, mother. Anything she put her mind to, she did. She was independent. She was, you know, she always persevered through everything. And the way I watched her fight and get through this cancer, and even though she was in denial, I mean, she fought. She was so determined to go back to work, even down to the last day. Like, she just never gave up. She had a really rough life, my mom, and it's like you just question you question everything when somebody dies. You're like, why would God do this? Why do we have to suffer? Why does a human being who's so good have to fucking go through this shit? It's so fucking horrible. So, I miss you, Mama. All right.